Next on Monica Pearson One-on-One, we're on the set of the new game show, The Perfect Line, where I go one-on-one with the show's host, Deborah Norville, who talks about her next chapter after spending 30 years on Inside Edition. The story behind her road to success, including a defining moment that forever changed her outlook.
I had allowed my definition of who I was to be defined by what I did. And I was no longer the anchor of the Today Show. I was no longer the fastest rising star in television news. I was no longer the golden girl, as I think the paper here in Atlanta had called me. I was nothing, and I felt like nothing.
How she overcame those feelings and the message from Barbara Walters that helped reignite her career. And later in the show, I go one-on-one with actor and comedian Billy Gardell, who talks about his return to stand-up.
Comics take a few years to come into their own voice, and Atlanta just happened to be where that happened for me.
Who are the artists on your playlist?
Because I'm from Georgia, I have to say, y'all got married in Ringo, Georgia?
We got married in Ringo.
You're pretty good. You're trying to get into my secrets.
Atlanta News First presents Monica Pearson, One-on-One.
Good evening and welcome to One-on-One. My first guest tonight has made history as the longest-running anchor on American television. And this Dalton, Georgia native got her start right here in Atlanta. It was a beauty pageant that ignited Deborah Norville's interest in television and led to a long broadcasting career. A career that included stints at The Today Show, ABC, CBS, and more than 30 years as host of Inside Edition. Now she's switching up her hosting duties and taking on the role of game show host. It's here on this set of The Perfect Line where I went one-on-one with Deborah Norville. Before Deborah Norville enters the set, the hype team puts everyone in place and revs them up.
It's just, I've been doing this for years, and it's just a matter of mixing and matching, demographics, age, color, just making it more fun and diverse, you know?
You have such a personality for this. What's it take to do your job?
Patience. It takes patience and just knowing that everybody is different and being able to, you know, communicate with any type of person.
So how do you get them energetic and not shy?
Oh, let me tell you. Listen, I'm the dancing queen. So whenever I bring people into this space, they have no choice. And if they are a little shy, I just give them a little push and support, and they just come right along.
So explain to me the dancing in the beginning.
Well, there's two things. We actually warmed it up in here for you. Typically, it is so cold in this studio that icicles will form on your nose. And so we did the dance party partly so that no one would die of frostbite, but we also felt like it gets everybody just like relaxed and in the mood and kind of in the jive, and you know, people see me out there dancing and having fun and they go, oh, she's not Deborah Norville, she's Deb. And I think it really relaxes our contestants, and it allows our audience to feel very much a part of this entire effort. And I think it just has made for a much better result for everybody.
And part of making the contestants comfortable is Deborah interviewing them on air.
That seems like to be an important part of the show for you.
It is for me, yeah, because I want to know these people. I get to spend 30, 45 minutes with them, and this is their moment to shine. This is their moment to be on TV.
Hey, Paula. Hi. Look who's on TV. He's doing good, too.
I don't know if it'll make the final edit, but we got the chance for that man to say hey to his mother, his uncle, and I forget whoever else. We had like 7 people we said hi to. And that's important for him. And even if one of those hellos gets on the final cut, he's going to be so happy about that. And whoever he said hey to is going to be so happy about that. I am now in the business of making people feel comfortable and happy. Whether you're here on this stage doing this game show or you're at home watching it on television, I want you to be comfortable. I want you to be happy. And at the end where we say, bye-bye, everybody, I want you to go, I'm so glad I spent 30 minutes with Deb on that show. That's it.
Deborah Norville, you didn't know it, but she was born to be a game show host. We think of her as this very smart and serious journalist and broadcaster, and she is all those things. But up here, she is able to let loose and be herself and have fun and just play this game with people. And she is shining so brightly. It's so exciting to watch.
So what's it like working with Deborah, someone you have watched on television?
Watched on television my whole life. I didn't know she was a UGA grad, so that's super cool. I'm from Georgia, so the synergy is there. She's an amazing woman, Southern belle, as they say. And it's amazing just to be in the experience, being so close around the production. I love it every moment.
The Perfect Line is a different kind of game show that was attractive to a journalist who grew up loving game shows.
But what I liked about The Perfect Line was, for someone who's been doing what I have been doing for the last 40 plus years, it's fact-based. You can't argue with what we put up there. It's logical, it's very orderly, and that sort of suits the me who alphabetizes her salad dressing and gravy mixes.
No, you don't.
I do, yeah. I wrote a book once and I said, the messier my life, the cleaner my closets are, which is really true. Organizing is a form of therapy. So right now they're not that organized because my life is pretty good, so I don't need to go organize my gravy mix.
So how did you decide to do this versus going in another form of journalism?
There was no uncharted territory left for me, I think, at Inside Edition. There literally wasn't a story we hadn't done. When you start getting blasé about going to the Oscars and doing the red carpet, you need to just have a wake-up call. And I was a little bit, oh, do we have to do the Oscars? Girlfriend, nobody says that. So I was looking for new challenges. And Monica, the reality is, I've done every kind of television program there is out there. I had never done a game show. I've been a contestant on a game show. I've been on Smarter Than a Fifth Grader. I've been a square on Hollywood Squares several times. But to host a game show, to be the person that makes the contestants feel at ease, to get to give away somebody else's money, that was fun. So I just did it because it was fun.
When we return, Deborah shares the difficult times in her career, from being told by a coworker that she didn't belong in the Atlanta market to being ousted from the Today Show, and how Barbara Walters and Oprah Winfrey came to her rescue.
To get a note from Barbara Walters when you were feeling so vulnerable was like kryptonite. It was just like gas in the tank.
And later, Billy Gardell talks about his return to stand-up comedy when we go one-on-one at the Punchline.
Monica Pearson One-on-One is sponsored by Montlick Injury Attorneys.
Deborah Norville planned to be a lawyer, but entering the Dalton Jr. Miss pageant, now called Distinguished Young Women, changed her career path.
Yes, ma'am. So I only entered Junior Miss because it was the weekend between high school football playoffs and the SAT test. And growing up in Dalton, Georgia, there literally was nothing else to do. So I signed up just because it was something to do, and you could maybe get some money for college, and I needed the money for college. But you had to have a talent, and Debbie Lee could dance, Sissy Carroll played the piano, this one twirled. I'm like, I can't do any of that stuff. And it was either twirl an 8-foot flagpole, which is what I did in the marching band, and you would probably not be terribly impressed with that, or model clothing I made. So my cousin took a bunch of pictures of me wearing outfits I'd made. I had all these modeling shots going on, a rear screen projector situation on the stage, and I pranced around and had a voice track of me talking about sewing. And I won the local, and then I won the state, which was over at the Agnes Scott in Decatur, I guess that is. And that woman who was in charge, she looked at me, she said, well, honey, don't you sing while you sew? Don't you tap dance while you sew? I said, no, ma'am, when I sew, I just sit there. And she put her finger in my face and she said, you're gonna know magic by the time you get to Mobile, young lady. I'm like, yes, ma'am. And they hired this person who was like the guy who did balloon tricks. He taught me some horrible tricks. Oh, and my slideshow, which had been so great and local, was illegal according to the national rules, so my outfits were pinned on the curtains. It could not have been more awful,
no.
But I won because half the score was your grades and your judging interview, and I could talk to a chair and we both have fun. So I ended up going to the national competition, and I saw the guys doing what you're doing, behind the cameras. I saw the people who had built these amazing stage pieces. I saw them being as friendly at 10 o'clock at night as they were at 8 o'clock in the morning when we saw them. And I thought, whoa, this production thing looks like fun. And I wanted to be a lawyer. But I thought, well, what I like about law is research. So if you married research with production, you'd probably be a TV reporter. And that is why I decided to be a TV reporter. And if my talent had not been sewing, I could have never gotten into the contest. I would have never seen all of this. I would have never aspired to be like Monica Kaufman, who I knew from Channel 2, and none of it would have happened. So there's two ways to go through life, and I know you go through life this way. One of them is like this, and the other's like this.
When you were leaving Inside Edition, you said you took 47 years to prove to someone who said to you when you started out at WAGA that you didn't belong here.
And you know who that person is, but I'm not going to tell you.
We're not going to tell.
No, we're not naming names. We're way past that. But yeah, and you know, there's a couple of messages from that. And one is for all of us. No matter who you are, no matter how far down the totem pole you perceive yourself to be, your words have more impact than you know. So choose them carefully, because you may place on someone a burden that they will carry with them for their entire adult life, as that person did for me. So that's lesson number one.
And you're still steamed about that.
It's just like, my whole motto in life, Monica, is there are two words. If everyone would apply them in their interactions, whether you're the top person in your country or the person who's digging the ditches, if you apply kindness and respect to your interactions, our world would be so much better. That person was neither kind nor respectful. They may have been right, but they weren't kind and they weren't respectful. But when you treat people with kindness and respect, it boomerangs back to you. And I do think that I am an example of that.
Did she ever apologize?
I don't think she knew. I don't think she knew. And that's fine. You know, because people who say that sort of thing are generally not terribly self-aware, or they're very self-important. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is, what I have learned is, and I've learned this so many times, and it's a lesson I've shared with my kids as well. Do not let someone else's assessment of your abilities be yours. It's a data point that they have. It's not your data point. When one of our kids had gotten into college, I was cleaning out my desk and I found that piece of paper the guidance person had given, where they give you a list of, you got a 70% chance of these schools you've never heard of before, 50-50 chance of getting to these, 30% of these, and then an asterisk by the ones you've got less than a 10% chance. My son got into the less than 10% chance school. And I found it on the desk. I took a screenshot of it. I sent it to him. I said, you may not remember this, but your guidance counselor did not think you could get into the university you are now attending. I said, you will have choices at different points in your life where someone will have an assessment of your abilities and you may not agree. Thank you for making the right choice. They were wrong. You believed in yourself. They didn't. And that's just life. People are always going to underestimate you. Don't accept their opinion.
Public opinion caused Deborah to be ousted from the Today Show, where she had been a rising star on the news desk. But things changed when Jane Pauley left and Deborah became her replacement to co-host with Bryant Gumbel. Ratings were not good. Then, while Deborah was on maternity leave with her first child, Katie Couric filled in and then was named a permanent replacement for Deborah. It put her in a tailspin.
It was hard. It was really hard. And there may have been a little postpartum depression, but the bigger thing was post-Today depression. And I wrote a book about it called Back on Track. And in the book, I described what for me was a pivotal moment where I had not gotten out of my bathrobe that day. I was lucky to have help, and the housekeeper had made an amazing meal and used Mama Silver and the Good Crystal and all that stuff to kind of cheer me up. And I didn't have the energy to take a fork of food to my mouth. And my husband said, you got to go to bed. So they put me to bed. I'm like, what about the baby? Who's going to feed the baby? We'll give him a bottle, it'll be fine. And I slept for probably 12 hours, which when you work that schedule, you don't sleep. And when you have a baby, you don't sleep. So it was the most I'd slept in literally years. And I remembered something a friend had told me years ago. When you need to have a good cry, take a hot shower, because when you come out, your face is going to be red and wet anyway. So I got in the shower, I had the cry. I vowed to myself, kind of like that scene in Gone with the Wind when Scarlett finds the one carrot the Yankees didn't get. As God is my witness, I'll never go hungry again. I vowed that I would never let them, defined as broadcast executives, have that kind of control over me. Because what should have been a beautiful period in my life, the birth of a healthy newborn, had been wrecked by what I was going through from being unceremoniously pushed off the Today Show. And I said, today I'm going to get dressed. And if I get good at getting dressed, I'll put on makeup. And if I can put on makeup and get dressed, maybe I'll go out. And sometimes it'd be 10 o'clock before I got all that done. And it was 6 weeks before I left the house. So I really went through a very tough time. And what I realized is I had allowed my definition of who I was to be defined by what I did. And I was no longer the anchor of the Today Show. I was no longer the fastest rising star in television news. I was no longer the golden girl, as I think the paper here in Atlanta had called me. I was nothing, and I felt like nothing. And then I realized who you are is not what you do. Who you are is what you believe in. Who you are is why you think you were put on this planet. Who you are is the difference you are meant to make in the lives of others. And none of that has to do with your job. And when I looked back on the moments when I was happiest in my life, it had nothing to do with my career. So I started focusing on those moments that were my personal wins, not the getting the Emmy or any of that kind of stuff. And slowly I got back on track. And what really helped me was my sewing machine. I sewed so much stuff for the baby's room. I sewed drapes and curtains and this and that and the other. And when you take a piece of raw fabric or a ball of yarn and you create something out of that nothing, you can't help but feel good about yourself. So I got myself back on track that way and eventually did get back into business. And you know, maybe I got lucky the first time with the Today Show, but you don't make it 30 years at Inside Edition.
No.
If you maybe are a little bit good. So it was kind of proven to myself that I did belong.
She also got support from one of the big names in the business, Barbara Walters.
She reminded me of her situation at ABC when Harry Reasoner did not want her co-anchoring the news with her. And she had received a letter from John Wayne. And John Wayne had said to Barbara Walters, "Don't let the bastards get you down." And Barbara wrote me a letter and said, when I was going through my trials, John Wayne wrote me and said, "Don't let the bastards get you down." And my message to you, Deborah, is don't let the bastards get you down. To get a note from Barbara Walters when you were feeling so vulnerable was like kryptonite. It was just like gas in the tank. I still didn't have a job, but Barbara Walters believed in me. So when ABC Radio came to me during that very dark period and said, "We want you to host a radio show." Now I've gone from being the anchor of the Today Show. I'm doing a radio show. I said yes, because I did it from home. My first guest was Oprah Winfrey, and my second guest was Barbara Walters. So these are women who were there for me when both my psyche and my career were in tatters. And my takeaway from that is I can be there for somebody when they similarly feel like nobody gives a hoot about them anymore.
Up next, life lessons with Deborah, the important skills she made sure her children learned, plus how the love story between her and her husband led to Deborah learning a new language. During the taping of The Perfect Line, I heard Deborah speak Swedish on the set. Her husband of 38 years, Carl Wellner, is Swedish. Her late mother's maiden name is Olsen and is Swedish. When Deborah and Carl were dating, she decided to impress him by taking Swedish lessons.
I went to Berlitz 3 nights a week, 3 hours a session. I learned Swedish. He didn't know I was taking the lessons. I met up with him and his family at Christmas, and we were having a drink before dinner, and he's speaking with his parents, and it wasn't Swedish. It wasn't the Swedish that woman taught me.
Oh,
put
no.
it that way. And I said nicely, I said, "What language are you speaking?" And he goes, "Estonian, of course." I'm like, "Estonian? Why are you speaking Estonian?" He said, "Well, you know, my parents were refugees. That's what we speak at home." So his mother tongue is Estonian. And in Swedish, I said, "Men, jag tar lektioner hela tiden. Du pratar inte svenska." And which says, I've taken lessons all the time. You don't speak Swedish? And he goes, "Why would I speak Swedish?" I'm like, you have a passport, you grew up in Stockholm, you went to Stockholm School of Economics, you know, your address says Sweden. There are 17 reasons why you should be speaking Swedish. And And they go, wow, she learned Swedish. And in Estonian, they start talking to themselves again. I'm like, that was a waste of my life, but I got the man. So it wasn't a waste. It wasn't a waste. I got the man. I got the ring.
Now, you know, you all have 3 wonderful children.
Yes.
2 boys and a girl.
Yes, ma'am.
And did you teach the boys the knitting the way you taught your daughter?
Well, I'll tell you what, I failed miserably on all counts. No, I did not teach the boys knitting. I didn't even try. I did try to teach Michaela knitting, and finally she came to me. She said, Mommy, I love you, but I don't love knitting. So no one knits, but I did better. I forced them to attend what I call Life 101. Life 101 consisted of, before you get to go out and play, we're all gonna sit on the sofa together. I gave them a scrap of fabric. I gave them a needle and thread. I gave them a button. I said, you're gonna learn how to sew on the button. You had to successfully sew on a button. Then you got to go out and play. Another day, we sit on the sofa. This time you're gonna learn how to make a hem. Successfully sew a hem, because when you find out how much you have to pay that person when you're an adult to hem a pair of pants for you, you'll be glad your mother taught you how to sew. Also included in the class was how to make a hamburger, how to operate the washing machine, how to wash dishes when you don't have a dishwasher, because you probably won't, how to make your bed properly, the corners. So they didn't learn knitting, but they learned plenty of other useful skills.
I love that. How old are they now?
Oh my gosh, they make me sound very old. One is 34, one is 30, and one is 27.
Married yet?
One is married, and that one is about to make me a grandmother.
Now that's exciting.
Yeah, we don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be a baby.
Now, did any of them follow you into the business?
No, nobody. They watched me.
Either.
It's okay. One in the family's plenty.
Deborah comes from a family of creatives. Her mother and grandmother taught her to knit, crochet, and sew. Deborah has written several books on knitting and has a collection line of yarns. Her father was in the textile business, a pilot and an inventor of a scooter-like mode of transportation.
So being in the textile industry, a lot of the mills, particularly back in the 70s, were in very small towns. They might have an airstrip, but they probably didn't have a taxi service. And so Dad would fly in to where he needed to call on his customers. He had this scooter that was probably about this big. In 2 pieces, there was a like a pin in the middle. So you would put that on. You would hook the chain onto the front part so that the thing would work. It had a little gasoline
12 miles
motor,
per hour.
probably, if he was speeding. And he would drive himself to his calls, meet his customers, do what he had to do, drive back to the airport, unfold it, get in the plane, and go to the next place.
Now, that kind of ingenuity, did you take pilot's lessons?
I did.
That's what I remembered.
Yeah.
Do you still fly?
I don't. I chickened out before I soloed. I had plenty of hours and all that stuff, but that was back when they would cut your shirt off and put it in the hanger and write your name, the date that you've soloed. And I don't know why I was thinking that I wouldn't have another shirt under. Anyway, I was embarrassed to solo because I thought I'd lose my shirt, and that just was so stupid. That is like one of my regrets. What an idiot.
That is not a word anyone else can use to describe Deborah Norville. She graduated summa cum laude from the University of Georgia, Grady College's School of Journalism and Mass Communication. She's an author. One of her books was a New York Times bestseller. The title, Thank You Power, Making the Science of Gratitude Work for You. She's made history as the longest-running anchor on a TV show. She's won 2 National Emmy Awards for reporting, and in October, she will receive the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 2025 Daytime Emmy Awards. When we return, Deborah talks about her retirement from news and why the Perfect Line game show is so unique. Plus, actor and comedian Billy Gardell talks about acting in controversial sitcoms and why he credits Atlanta for his comedy success.
Let's see what your song is.
All right.
Sharon, you've got the Cha-Cha Slide by DJ Casper. Do you know this one?
Well, I have definitely done this in weddings. I don't recall going to a wedding before '83 where I did the Cha-Cha Slide. So I'm going to assume that it's fairly new. So let's say after 1983.
Okay, where does Cha-Cha Slide go?
You can win $10,000 on the Perfect Line if you can put topics such as events, people, places, or things in a perfect line, the order in which they occurred.
I think the martini is popular in film, but not in real life. I'm gonna put the martini as the least popular among all these drinks.
Okay, he's got it as the least popular. Is he right? No.
So we have found that because it's anybody can play, you don't have to, it's most trivia, it's like, well, I gotta know a lot of stuff. But in this case, you don't have to know the answer. You just have to be able to think it out to figure out where the answer goes. And so really, anybody has a shot and anybody can play.
Have you tried it?
Well, I help write them, so I'm not allowed to play them.
So when you're going through that writing process, what do you look for?
It's a mix. First of all, we're making 180 episodes, so we needed a lot of lines. So just any idea was a good idea to us. But we're just looking for a nice broad mix of topics, of any sort of line that can include a lot of things is a good variety, is a good way to go. So we like to do pop culture. We like to do basic stuff like history and math and science stuff from that you grew up with learning in school, and just a mix of that stuff. And sometimes we even like to do surveys, like who, pet peeves or, stuff that, like today we had one that was most popular tattoos. So things you necessarily wouldn't think of, wacky stuff.
Okay, you know what this means, Jay? If you get this one right, you get the entire $2,400. Wow. Let's see what your cocktail is. The margarita. Where on the line does this go?
I think it's the most popular drink, so I would put it after martini.
Okay, is it number one on the line? Is Jay gonna get $2,400? Yes, he is! Okay, I love it!
It's obvious hosting The Perfect Line is fun for Deborah Norville, but does she miss what she did for decades?
That's a good question. I still follow the news, but the difference is when my phone feeds me an alert, my instinct isn't to text my executive producer or jump onto social media and share the information. That's not my job anymore. So I've weaned myself successfully, I think, in that regard. I'll never stop caring, but in all seriousness, we live in a time when the news is so frustrating, not because of your political point of view, but because we seem to be in a time where there's an unwillingness to find common ground. And years ago, I believe this was after the 2004 presidential election, and one of the papers in Boston did a story where they took every voting precinct in the country and they apportioned the amount of red ink based on the amount of Republican votes that were received and the amount of blue ink based on the number of Democratic votes. And the result was America is purple. We go a little more eggplant in some towns, a little more magenta in others, but we're purple. There's so much more we agree on in this country than we disagree on, but we seem at this moment to focus on the disagreements. So for me, to be on a game show that is factually oriented, that is researched within an inch of its life, everything we say, you can bank on. We have an entire team of researchers. We have at least 5 researchers that are fact-checking everything we say. And then I think it's another 3 people that kind of overview that. So we have a team that really just cares about, if we said it on The Perfect Line, it is perfectly true. So for me at this time, this is where I need to be.
When I look at your career, I think the name of the show is definitely something that depicts you.
Oh.
It is The Perfect Line.
I've been very blessed.
From that young woman in Dalton, Georgia, in the Junior Miss pageant, to now making history in broadcast journalism.
It's crazy.
By being on the air for 30 years at the anchor of a show.
Thank you.
God is good.
God is good. He has blessed me richly.
You can watch The Perfect Line weekdays at 4 on Peachtree TV. He starred in hit TV shows Mike and Molly and Bob Hart's Abishola. Up next, Billy Gardell tells us why he owes a lot of his comedy success and his marriage to Atlanta.
You may know my next guest as Mike Biggs from the TV show Mike and Molly, or as Bob Wheeler on Bob Hart's Abishola. But what you may not know, Billy Gardell owes a lot of his success in comedy and marriage to Atlanta. I went one-on-one when Billy came back to the Punchline to perform.
Billy Gardell is a TV, movie, and voiceover actor, a game show host, and a stand-up comedian. He calls stand-up his bread and butter, first spread in Florida.
I started in Orlando, Florida, and Atlanta's kind of where I kind of came into my own as a comic when I moved here. And the Punchline was my home base for a long time. I met my manager, who's one of the owners here, Chris DePetta, and we've been together for 30 years on a handshake. And when I decided to come back to do stand-up, I wanted to pick the places that inspired me as a young man. So I've been kind of touching those roots, and the Punchline is always at the top of my list.
So what is it about the audience in Atlanta that helps you creatively?
Well, I just think this was a place where I kind of came into, you know, comics take a few years to come into their own voice, and Atlanta just happened to be where that happened for me. And I always loved the music scene here. I love Little 5 Points here, and so I just like want to kind of get that on me while I'm writing again. And the Punchline audiences are always been smart and connective, and so that's what I like. And you want to be funny everywhere. You want to be funny in Atlanta, you want to be funny in New York, you want to be funny in Chicago. So I always found that there's a good, there's like a cross drift of people in Atlanta. It's a big city, and so you get a nice cultural reaction when you're here, and I like that.
So what have you written, or do you write or do you improvise?
You know, I wish I was one of those prolific guys that sat down in front of a computer, but I wasn't that way in high school, so why would it be that way now? The way I do it is more kind of like jazz. You know, I come up with an idea and then I come talk it to life on stage, and then I tape that while I'm up here, and if it sounds right, it just locks in. My ear's kind of musical. That's kind of how it works for me. It works different for everybody.
So let's talk about your comedy.
Sure.
Is there anything you will not make fun of?
You know, man, I think it's subjective. And again, I go back to jazz. You know, I'm a jazz fan, and I think everybody plays their horn different. You know, you have to do your personal taste, and I like to bring people together. I like to talk about the human condition, and I talk about what's happening in my life. I talk about being a parent, being an empty nester, being married 25 years, and what that takes. Because I think young people, they're lied to about a lot of things. Like, they think you're supposed to have a job that fulfills you every minute of the day. You know, I've never had a boss that worried about how I felt. That never happened. And the same with love. Love is about, eventually, it's about commitment. And if you can't make the turn from passion to commitment, you ain't gonna do the time. So you have to find your love and your commitment as you go. And if you can do that, like the beginning's easy. It's those middle years. Can you get through that when you're just sick of each other and keep forgiving each other and keep accepting each other? And then you get on the other side of that and you're like, I have somebody for the rest of my life. And that's powerful to me.
What does your wife bring to you and has brought to you over your career that has allowed you to do film, voiceover?
She is so incredibly secure, and she's powerful in her compass. She's empathetic. My wife is compassionate. She's smart. She's the things I work to be. And it took me years to acknowledge, like I always thought I knew, but these days I think I really get that this woman has been beside me, in front of me, or behind me, whatever I needed my whole ride. And to have someone like that you can't beat that.
It's priceless.
I think that's what kept me from messing up in Hollywood. You know, I didn't get sucked into anything because I always had, you know, I wasn't a party guy that way. I drank early, but I've been sober a long time without alcohol. I haven't had a drink in 17 years, but I always had something more important to go home to. So my job never became who I was. And I like to talk about that too. You gotta have something you're fighting for. If you know what you're fighting for, you can stay in the ring.
Patty Knight Gardell is originally from Vidalia, Georgia, but Billy met her in Atlanta.
So how did you two meet?
True, I was working the Punchline, but I had saw her 3 times. She was working in the banking industry at that time. I saw her at a bank, then I saw her at the show at the Punchline when nobody knew who I was. And then I saw her at a jazz club. There was a little jazz club, 290, that was near the old Punchline. I used to go in there after the show. She was in there. So I figured 3 times one day, you got to take a shot, right? So I saw what she was drinking, and I ordered one. I took it to her table, and I said, I'm Billy, drink this till I'm cute. which I thought was a good line. But she looked at me and went, I'm gonna need another one. And she shot me down. Been chasing her laugh for 25 years.
She sounds like she has a good sense of humor.
She does. It's not often, but it's usually a kill shot. She's like a sniper. She waits in the bushes and then picks her moments.
Another woman, his grandmother, Edith Dean, said he could be a comedian.
I used to spend the weekends with her. I'd spend Friday and Saturday at Grandma's house, and we used to watch Johnny Carson on Friday night, and I would watch the comedians, and I said, you think I could do that? And she said, I believe you can if you put everything you have into it. And I trusted her opinion and respected her opinion so highly, I never really asked anybody else. So if you want some advice, ask someone you love if they think you can do it, and if they say yes, don't ask nobody else.
When One-on-One continues, the comedians who influenced Billy Gardell. And later, Billy talks about acting in controversial sitcoms.
We did this to them. We raised a generation of house cats. That's what we did. And now we're pissed about how they act? That doesn't track, does it? And then they go, well, my parents, your parents suck too. I'm from Generation X. Our parents were so bad they used to have a commercial at night that said, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are?
When did you discover you had this comedic side? Was it in junior high, high school?
I think probably around, I got serious about it around 9th grade. I thought, this is just what I'm gonna go do. And I just didn't kind of look back. And I always found, you know, I think most comics the comics that aren't observational, comics that talk about life, usually have a little bit of, you know, trauma or, you know, some things that have happened in the past, and you find that humor becomes a great way to get through that, you know? And so that kind, you know, my mom and dad went through a divorce, and there was a couple stepfathers, and yada, yada, yada. Everybody has their baggage. But you learn to kind of get through things with a sense of humor, and that just became like a healing thing for me. And these days, I think we need laughs more than ever. So that's kind of why I came back out, and I enjoy making people laugh. I still love doing it. I've had some great success. I feel very blessed. And so I feel like I can be of service. If I make you forget your stuff for an hour, I did my job.
So let's go back to that youth.
Yes.
I read in some of the stuff that I was reading that you had a, quote, troubled childhood.
But who didn't? You know, I don't trust anybody who didn't have a troubled childhood. You know, we just had some tough times, you know. My mom, at one point, it was us, you know, her, and I was doing 40 hours a week at 15 trying to help pay the rent, and then she got remarried, and that didn't work out, and we had some not so good stepfathers. We had 2 of them. One of them was okay, the other was horrible. But I mean, it's like I tell my son, look, nobody leaves the house without a dent emotionally or physically, and some of us get both. And if you can't learn to let that go and move forward, you'll use that as an excuse to never do anything in your life. So that became my driving force, and I'm hoping that I've imparted that to him, although he's living a little easier life than I did. Maybe he don't realize it, but he is. I think we've raised a generation of house cats, is what I think we've done.
When it comes to comics, 2 of his favorites were Richard Pryor and George Carlin.
Pryor and Carlin, 2 greatest comics I think ever. Pryor could talk about, there's a great book that I recommend to young comics called Pryor Convictions. He accidentally wrote a how-to book on comedy, but it was just like everything else he does, it was honesty. Because he wrote about his pain, and then in italics you see the joke that came from that. So it became kind of a blueprint. And then Carlin had that brilliant way of being able to hold our hypocrisy to our face and still make us laugh at it, which made us consider it. And so to me, I'll never be as good as those 2, but those were always the guys that I went, that's what I want to try to do. I want to try to do that because I think they moved people in the right way. I think there was a compassion in them.
But they also were kind of blue.
Yeah, I'm a little blue. I mean, I swear a little bit, you know.
You?
Yeah, I swear a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to run you out of the room on gross or political because I think in this world right now, you can't change people, but if you can remind them what we have in common, then maybe there's a chance for some healing. And so that's what I do. I'm a little softer than those guys, but that's okay. I know who I am. And so again, it's about finding your voice.
He also had to find a way to manage his weight. He's lost 170 pounds.
So were you heavy when you were in high school?
I started gaining weight probably around senior year, and then it just got out of hand by the time I was 40. And then recently, you know, and then I don't have any complaints. I mean, I carried it for a long time, but you can't outrun them numbers. And then I got into some problems with my, you know, cholesterol, blood pressure, and then I got type 2 diabetes. So I just started thinking, you know, I better do something drastic, because I don't want to have to have come from where I came from to get what I got and then be in a chair the rest of my life. So that's why I made the change.
But when you were doing Mike and Molly, Overeaters Anonymous, the couple met.
Yep.
And at that point, you were heavy.
Yeah.
Some people criticized the show,
yeah,
while others embraced it.
Listen, if we listen to critics, we'll never go anywhere. Go where the love is. You know, because look, when I was big, everybody on the internet was like, he has to lose weight. I lost weight, now everybody on the internet is like, he's sick. So you can't listen to that noise. You pick the ones that are supporting you and you gravitate to that. You know, I always tell my son, you're gonna be whoever you hang out with. So make sure that you're hanging around positive people, people that inspire you, people that care about you. Not people that kiss up to you, but people that are truthful with you, but with love. Like my father used to say, you hang around the barbershop long enough, you're gonna get a haircut. So make sure you see what barbershop you're hanging around.
Oh, I like that. What other statement do you remember from your dad?
Oh, millions. My dad just had a great way. You know, he was a Navy guy, so it was always 10 minutes early, 5 minutes late. One of the most powerful things I saw my father do that taught me work ethic was, we used to live in this little row house in Pittsburgh, and there was a hole behind the washer, and he had the washer pulled out in the basement, and he was trying to patch this hole. He's smoking and swearing, and I went down there, I said, why are you doing this? I go, you could just slide the washer there and nobody will know the hole's there. And he goes, I'll know. And I don't know why, but that landed on me. And then he said to me when I moved to Los Angeles, he said, you don't know nobody, you ain't pretty, and you ain't got no money. You better outwork everybody. And so that stayed with me.
It sounds like you should have done a book on your dad's saying.
You know, the more I write about him, the more I think about that, because he is such, and especially now, you know, he's gone now, but he's with me every day. You know, I always have a cup of coffee with him on Sunday. I'm not a lunatic, listen. What I do is I go out and I kind of ask a question that I would want him to answer, and I think about what he would say, and I hear his voice. And so he's always been he was the guy that was like, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit, keep at it, because he didn't get to realize his dream. He wanted to be an animator. My dad was a good artist, but he never got his chance to do that. So he kind of got to live through me and see my success before he left, and I'm so grateful for that.
Billy's other show, a situation comedy, also raised eyebrows. Bob Hart's Abishola was about a white businessman falling in love and eventually marrying the Nigerian nurse who cared for him while he was in the hospital.
It is a lesson, and it was done at the right time. It was not preachy, and all it was about was love conquers everything. And that's a powerful message, especially nowadays. And it was created by Chuck Lorre, who created Mike and Molly, Big Bang Theory, and you know, he's the man. But he co-created that with the woman who played Kemi, Gina Yashere, who's a great comedian in her own right. And Falake Olowofayeku was my co-star, and that was her first series, and she came out as the lead and was amazing. And what that show proved is, look, love is love. And one of the funniest things, the wonderful part about having two different cultures on that show was the reminder that when you marry someone, you marry their whole family. And I think the soul of that show was Barry Shabaka, who played Uncle Tunde. Yeah. Because he was the first person that was on Team Bob. And once he took me in, the rest of the family had to. And so that's how I got over the fence. And it was our relationship that allowed me access to his niece, and then allowed me to court her, and then our love grew. And I thought we did a really nice job.
It was more than a nice job. Why would you take a show like that, which is the same as Mike and Molly, that could be very controversial?
Well, you know, man, I think what's controversial is what people are unaware of. Experience breeds education. And so if you're already going to cast this idea out that you don't like something before you experience it, you're going to miss a lot of your life. And so what was so great about that show, both shows had two secret ingredients, and they were both love. Like Mike and Molly was two people who thought they'd never fall in love, falling in love. You can't not root for that. Bob Hart's Abishola was two people from two completely different worlds willing to hold hands and go through that together and endure each other's family because their love was that strong. And those are themes that we need to see, in my opinion.
Billy Gardell continues his comedy tour through November. You can see him on Amazon Prime in a new independent film, The Vortex, where he plays a gambling addict. As for his home life, he's hoping he can convince his wife to let him take over the garage for his new hobby, model trains. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you join me every Sunday at 8, right here on Atlanta News First. Want to see who I'll be going one-on-one with next? Subscribe to Atlanta News First on YouTube to see new episodes. Good night.